Hello everybody, my name is Matthew Toth. I am the founder of C3 Technology Advisors. I'm here with Ryan Boyk, Global Account Executives Rockstar, and Ryan Dengate, our lead engineer. So we had an interesting case happen recently with a major client of ours getting breached. We're going to talk a little bit about that today because I find it really fascinating. So before we talk about the breach itself, I want to talk a little bit about who the client is and what they do. So maybe you can kind of set the stage. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. It's a large electrical wholesaler and retailer that ships product all around the world. It's a very devastating breach.
Okay, all right. So take us back, because I think they called us about a month and a half or so ago. Take me through that conversation, that phone call.
Yeah, sure. He called, and I knew something was wrong right away because I could hear and almost sense the urgency in his voice when they said, "Hey, we got hit with a ransomware at location A, and can you help us in any way?" I said, "Of course we can help." So I grabbed this Ryan, our engineer lead, and we talked with the client for about 10 minutes. We gathered our C3 resources, and we determined that Quest Technology Management was going to probably be the best option in this case. They have an elite incident response team. They were available to get to work right away, and in fact, they had a conference bridge open within an hour and started working on containment. They also had several boots on the ground the very next day to help with containment and then a restore. So they did really good.
Okay, all right. Let's talk a little bit about the breach.
Sure.
So we kind of diagnose this a little bit.
Sure.
What did that look like?
Yeah, so the majority of cybersecurity incidences today are still coming in through phishing attacks. It's still a very easy attack vector to come in on, and that's exactly what happened. An end user clicked on a malicious link. Ransomware was able to infiltrate the network. Privileged password management really wasn't a key area of focus, so they were easily able to crack and get an administrator account on the domain. And it systematically went through in 5 hours. From 5 hours from when it was first installed, it wiped out files, databases, email, even took down their phone system so they couldn't even receive or send calls, which was very important to them.
Yeah, because they had a big call center operating out of that location as well.
Yeah.
So if I'm getting this right, then the entire business is down. Like they're down to like operating off of.
It's like pulling the plug from the wall.
Wow. So just cell phones and pads of paper.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. All right. So maybe kind of take us through like what happens when files are completely encrypted.
Sure.
Like maybe talk about what that recovery process looks like and where
Sure.
you even start when you have so much stuff that's either deleted or encrypted.
Yeah, and you're kind of in that panic. What do you do?
Right.
So I think people are really faced with two decisions. One is, do I pay the ransom? Do I keep letting people try to extort money from me and take advantage of me, or do I rely on local backups or offsite and disaster recovery services? In this case, because of the way the attack came in, the local backups were also encrypted, so there was no local backups to go to. The only choice was to utilize offsite backups, which were truly just backups. There was no disaster recovery. We couldn't spin up servers in a matter of hours. All of that data had to be physically shipped back to the location to rehydrate the environment and to, in some cases, manually rebuild servers because they weren't able to get the data recovered.
So this wasn't like this wasn't one machine or one VM kind of being wiped. I mean, this was the entire organization. So like, how long of a period of time was it before they were at least limping along and maybe to some point where they could operate normally? Now I'll pose that to the both of you.
They couldn't even ship an order for over 5 days. And even at that point, they worked for about another week to a week and a half on life support.
What I find very interesting about this is when you think of at a C-suite level, they think about DR being like a tornado or a hurricane or a flood or massive power outage or something like that. I don't really think that things like this come to the minds of our C-suites, the C-suites of our clients. So they were back up after at least 5 days. They could at least start taking orders again. So maybe let's talk about how their security posture moving forward is going to be a little bit different. Like what are they going to do differently moving forward?
Sure. So I think there's two key things. One is backup and true disaster recovery strategy. For an organization like this that is orders and that customer interaction is so critical to the business, if we could have spun them up in the cloud on a DR platform in a matter of hours, business would have been minimally impacted. The second thing is really re-looking at things like password management, privileged account management, and really making sure that as many of the holes in the environment are plugged up as best as possible.
I'll tell you one thing that I've learned, not only through this process, but through some conversations with a lot of our clients, is that this isn't just something that happens to Target or happens to Marriott or happens to like these large organizations that have to disclose this because they are compelled to because of compliances and such. Smaller organizations just deal with this and they don't tell the rest of the world, so that when it does happen to another organization out there, they think, oh my gosh, like I didn't know this thing was that prevalent. So I think this is so much more prevalent than everyone thinks about, because not a lot of disclosure actually happens today when it happens to companies that we all know. So I'd be kind of curious, if you had to talk about a lesson that you learned throughout this, what would that lesson be?
Oh, I got to tell these C-level executives that cybersecurity needs more attention, needs to be given higher priority. After all, you're putting data and people's lives at stake with some of these types of breaches. So the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I know that IT staffs are unable to keep up with the rate of change in the cybersecurity space. They can't handle it, they don't have the expertise, and that's it.
All right. And I think if anything, it talks a little bit about what we do here at C3 Technology Advisors. So throughout this whole process and this harrowing process with our client, they weren't able to run their business, and we sat with them at their side throughout this in helping them evaluate technologies and providers, and we had to do this in a pinch. This wasn't a decision that could be made next week or next month or next year. They had to make this right then and there. So we helped them with that research analysis and picking providers and picking solutions. So that is what we do well for our clients. So Ryan Boyk, Ryan Dengate, thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.
Ask that question about the other client.
Huh?
Ask that question about the other client.
Oh, well, that's for the outtakes now. We had another client of ours recently reach out to us with some kind of a similar breach. Can you guys talk about that for a quick moment?
Oh man, it's a big entertainment company, thousands and thousands of customers and transactions per day, and they got the same thing. Malware came in via phish, started infecting the entire environment.
Gotcha. Okay, so something kind of similar. So what was their response to all this? Like, what were the actions that they took?
Their strategy was to walk around with floppy disks. They're really taking a gamble on just wiping PCs and seeing if that takes care of it.
So were they able to, they have a lot of client information, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of credit cards and such. So how do they know that they're able to kind of forensically figure out what had happened and that it hadn't gone to other parts of the environment?
They really don't have anybody helping them oversee what's going on and make sure that there's been containment and a final resolution.
So they just wiped a few machines?
They're literally walking around with floppy disk wiping machines and reloading them.
Well, that's scary as shit. You got to know when to hold,
What a gamble.
know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away.
Know when to run. You never count your money.
When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done.
Taylor's like, I gotta go work somewhere else.